Shane and I have managed to keep things quite light and casual. We talk about singing, we talk about leadership behaviors in survival mode, we talk about organizations and the options that they're offering employees during this COVID-19 crisis. So sit back, enjoy, listen, and look forward to comments. I don't have a good voice. And so the question then is, are you genetically disposed to have this good voice?
Ooh. So I think that the voice, like just about any other skill or any other aspect of human capacity, is, it's half half. It's nature and nurture. Like, I think there are some people, just like there are some, people that are born like incredible athletes. There are some people that just have like a really great timbre to their voice. They have a really great ear for music or whatever it might be. But then also, like, you have to acknowledge practice and the important role that plays. I don't want to like get all big on myself, but like I know I have a pretty good voice, and yeah, I've gotten good comments and stuff from on it. But when I think about the nature nurture thing, I often think, oh man, I'm super lucky to have been born with a good singing voice. But when I think back on it, it's like, no, you've put in your 10,000 or more hours of singing when you were very young. Like, I went to church as a little kid initially and sang in the choirs and stuff there. I was big into choirs in my teen years and stuff like that. I picked up guitar early and always sang with it. So I was like, no, like, there may have been some aspect where I can thank my genetics and parents, but like a lot of it too is like I put in the time. So yeah, so I think it's both. I think you can have a decent starting point, but even if you're kind of, people take lessons. And I used to give lessons in Montreal, and yeah, I had some people that when they came to me would like, sound like a chorus of dying lemurs, but you teach them to start like training their ear for pitch. You teach them to start to like know what a good timbre or a good sound is. So yeah, I think there's both ways.
So, and it's funny you say that because, so I don't have a good voice. Like, it actually isn't a good voice. And then when I sing, it originally was a terrible voice. So 2 years ago it would have been horrifying.
Yeah.
And then now 2 years later, without any practice, but just no deliberate practice, just sort of organically,
Yep.
It's improved. And it's improved because, I can I hear a C, so I can sing the C. And then you also become more disciplined. I think that's one of the first things you start to develop is you realize how capable you are.
Yeah.
And then you start to play within that range. And I think that's like your first milestone in improving, is knowing, oh, I got to stay within this range.
The biggest thing I think is actually not the voice, it's the ear. And it's knowing, because the voice, it's infinitely adjustable. Anybody with like, you're a dynamic guy, you can speak eloquently and things like that. And part of that means that you know how to control your voice and your presence, volume, pitch, all these things. So the real challenge isn't necessarily how do you use your vocal cords well, but are you hearing, how bad or how good or like where you are in the pitch and all those things. That's, to me, I think the bigger thing is when somebody says you've got a great voice, they're really complimenting your ear, because it means you can hear yourself well enough to know how to adjust and you know what good sounds like.
It's funny because I bet there's a science behind this where you just want to get to the campfire good enough voice that no one says that's a bad voice. No one remembers you for your voice. You're not memorable. You don't want to be memorable for the wrong reasons, right? So you sort of, that's all I ask of myself. Fortunate that I can sing and play and I have the coordination to do that. I have this benefit. Then as I play, I realize like I can clear a room. So I'm pretty sure it could be a combination of the guitar playing and the voice. In that same conversation, she said, "Are you taking the Udemy singing classes?"
Yeah.
It's great. It's hours of like exercises I have to do. But the problem, no one's giving me any feedback.
And feedback is one of those things that is so hard to come by, which is so strange. Because in theory, like, everyone's got an opinion, but I think everyone is very reluctant to give it for a lot of reasons. One, we just don't want to poke our nose in other people's business. So, which means that if you want feedback, you've got to explicitly go out and ask. And then two, if any of that feedback is critical, nobody wants to anger anyone or piss anybody off. So it's always hard to even give honest feedback. I'm working with a professional coach right now.
Right.
And one of the things that one of the first things that we talked about was this idea of radical candor, which is that you are committing to being like completely blunt and expressive of your opinion and of what you feel. And it's something that is like a bit of a lost art that, so let's say you and I are working together on a project at Seek, and you, I don't know, do something weird in a meeting that we're both in with a client. And I have this sort of crisis moment where I'm like, well, I know Carlo's a really nice guy. I know he means well. I know his intentions were good, but like, he really fumbled in something there. There's, first the question of, do I even talk to him about this? Because would it be weird? Because we don't know each other necessarily that well. I don't know if he's open to taking criticism. But then there's the other half of, if I do decide, yeah, I'm going to do this, how do I say it in a way that is both getting the message across, but also like respecting you, your talents, your feelings, every bit of that. I don't think I have like here's my perfect thesis or here's the conclusion I've reached, but what I'm trying is essentially to be conscious of, in every interaction, be blatantly honest. The hard part, especially because this is going to be a weird statement, I'm a fairly empathetic person, but I'm also a little bit on the spectrum, if you know what I mean. Like I'm also, I don't want to say like, I don't always realize when I'm being too blunt or too harsh or how other people feel about what I might say. So I tend to pick up when I screw up, but I don't always know that I'm about to like drop a hand grenade in the middle of the room when I say something a little bit provocative. But I'm now trying to ignore that voice in your head that says, whoa, is this going to hurt somebody? Because I honestly had to train myself for a long time. Like I was not an awkward kid in like a hide in the corner awkward kid, but I was an awkward kid that just said way too much too bluntly and would sometimes offend or piss people off. And so through my 20s, I really trained a lot of that out of me. I said, okay, unless you really have an opinion, keep your mouth shut. And now I'm actually trying to like go back on that and find this balance between speaking the truth, speaking my mind. But now it's about doing it in a way that is amicable to everyone, that gets the point across, but that no one feels offended by or hurt by. So it's the, if you do something weird with a client, it's couching it in the right words. It's saying, hey, this may just be like totally subjective. This may be completely how I'm just feeling. I may be way off base, but I noticed this and it made me feel kind of weird. What do you think about that? Or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, so far positive results. Like I've got my startup, and working with the team there and being like pretty weirdly, like whenever I feel anything is even slightly off, I'll say it. And it's as simple as like, hey, in that meeting, I got a weird gut feeling. Did you catch anything? And if the person says yes, then it's like, cool, let's talk about that. And it's really easy to have the open discussion. If they say no, then maybe you have to divulge a little bit more and kind of, but I think a key part of radical candor too, though, is owning everything that you say. It's not putting the blame or the assignment on anyone else. It's just saying, hey, this is how I felt. I may be way off base, but this is me. So
yeah.
And
you'll see it in coaching programs like feedback models. You familiar with sandwich feedback?
Yeah. And I've always kind of hated sandwich feedback.
Yeah.
Again, it's like, this is what I actually want to say, but I'm going to make you feel good about yourself by saying this and this.
Yeah. Or you could just prime someone. You say something like, hey Shane, man, it's you did a really good job today. And then and it's worse. It's like I've even changed some of the language from sandwich. I've used like tee up, like where you tease someone up and you start to fluff them all up, and then you smack them in the head with what you're trying to get across. And it's funny, I used to develop coaching programs, and the feedback model that was very successful was the one that just genuinely told the truth. And that's essentially it. And because if you didn't tell the truth, you undermined your feedback then and in the future.
Yeah.
You undermine the positive feedback.
Exactly. It's kind of silly. Hopefully I don't go off on too much of a tangent here, but all this time under COVID has given us a lot of time to think about, what's actually important, what's actually valuable, what do we care about? Like, I need food, I need basic human interaction, these kinds of things. But it's kind of silly when you start to realize how much of the modern business environment and how much of how we interact these days has gotten a little bit weirdly convoluted, in a way that has become unnatural. And so, yeah, simple things like just stating how your feelings. Like modern business has really stripped away, um, any discussion of an individual's feelings. And actually, that's one of the weird benefits of COVID, in my opinion, of all this isolation downtime. Like you and I started this conversation with, "Hey, how you feeling?" and yada yada yada. And I said, "Yeah, I had a bit of a day," and you said, "Yeah, I had one of those yesterday too." And like we both just acknowledged that we had some sort of anxiety or frustration or depression. We wouldn't have done that 3 months ago. Let's be honest. Had you and
Right.
I had a business meeting, we would have said, "Hey, how are you, Shane?" "I'm good. How are you, Carlo?" "Oh, good.
Yeah.
Let's get into
Yeah.
business." Yes. We wouldn't have acknowledged like that. Yeah, I'm coming to you today with a bit of baggage. Like I had kind of a shitty day. And I
Yeah.
can say that and we can move on. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but I think it's still important to be able to talk about that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a vulnerability now that people are bringing forward, um, and it's becoming a safer place. Now, I don't know what that means for the future, but certainly I've even seen it with clients and with peers. So it's like, hey, how are you? How's your family? How are things?
yeah.
And people are open to talking about that, and it's
Hmm.
I wonder what the implications will be even in the future, as as we do get back to a new normal. um, how will they
I
react?
asked that same I asked that same question today. So I'm a fellow at Massey College at U of T, and oh wait, at the school that shall not be named.
No
um,
worries.
and and there's a series right now called Massey Dialogues, and it's usually about 3 a week, and they interview different fellows, and like Massey's one of those places that has like a crazy. I didn't even know about it before I started my PhD, and I was lucky to sort of get in, and it's one of those places that like when you look at the history of some of the people involved, it's intimidating. So today, the principal, Nathalie de Rosier, was interviewing Julie Payet, because she's one of the old fellows. And so she's asking all these questions, and then they opened it up, and I was watching, and I was lucky enough to ask a question that was picked for them to deal with. And my question was this, which was that the one, again, similar to what we're talking about, the one sort of silver lining of everything to do with COVID right now is that we're all seeing a lot more compassion, both individually and even institutionally. Like we're all becoming even more socialist than we may have already been or not been. And the question is like, how do we retain that? How do we make sure that in, I don't know, 6 months, a year, 18 months, whatever it's going to be, when things get fully back to normal, we don't just go back to cutthroat capitalism and business as usual. And no one really had a good answer other than like lead by example. If that's the stuff that you want to keep, then keep it. And that might mean in business meetings 8 months from now, when I say, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" and everyone goes, "Yeah, yeah, we're fine," like leaning in and going, "No, no, 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 no. How are you actually doing? Like, how is your day going?" And insisting on stuff like that. So I've been ruminating on that, and kind of thinking, okay, what are the parts of this in terms of like the human connection, the compassion that I want to keep, and how do I keep them? Because it's probably going to be easy to let it slide once we're all back to normal, whatever that is.
Normal. Yeah, my fear is the answer to that is we're going to forget about it. We're quite a forgetful
Mhm.
species. We just we don't remember things. In fact, it's actually not that long ago where our behaviors were the old normal. It's only about 5 6 weeks. You and I would have bumped into each other 6 weeks ago. We probably would have shook hands. 2 months ago, you're doing bro hugs with people, and now you can watch,
Yeah,
you can watch a Netflix show and watch two people get really close together on a subway and have this anxiety in you, thinking, "Oh my God, why are they so close?" So we're only
yeah,
6 weeks removed from a handshake to now having this anxiety watching two people sit next to each other. So what that just tells me is we've already forgotten elements of the old normal, and we are truly a product of the time. Now, that has its advantages. The advantage could be once we're out of this, we actually um, adapt to what's around us, and we quickly start to we forget about this and we move on. And that idea of moving on is has its advantages, has its disadvantages, because we move on from both the good and the bad. Unfortunately, I
Mm-hmm.
think back to 1998 in Montreal. There was an ice storm in Quebec. It was
Yeah.
2 weeks, power cut off. It was an amazing time a teenager. I had no power. That meant no video games, no TV, and we literally sat by a fire. And I never played so much Monopoly in my life, but we had such an amazing time. And every time, and all we can remember from that, the lesson, was how much we just really enjoyed it. Did we apply it every day after that? Did we become more connected to people? Did I say to my parents, I'm not going to play video games tonight. Why don't we crack out the Monopoly and do that on a weekly basis? The answer was no, or is no. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious to see how we come out of this in social behaviors. Do you think we'll go back to the handshake?
Oh, honestly, that's going to be a hard one to break for me personally. Like, and beyond the handshake, like I'm a hugger. If I've met you more than a few times and gotten a good vibe, I'll get right in there. So
Yeah, yeah,
I don't think it'll be quite as default as it has been. But I think it's going to be a hard habit to break for a lot of people. I think the handshake going away is going to be a generational thing. I think people over a certain age, in the same way that they, suck at technology, will continue to do handshakes. But younger people coming up, and so it's this is like an age threshold thing, right? Like, do you cough like that, or that? And I think similarly, when you greet someone, do you greet them like this
yeah,
or like this?
yeah,
Because even like knuckles became a thing to greet people for a while when it was like, oh, sorry, I'm sick, but Nux or something like
yeah,
that. So
yeah.
yeah, I think that one we will start to see the end of it, but I think it will be another 20, 30 years before the handshake fully goes away. So
Yeah, I don't know. There's
I'm curious.
certainly, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you were in Montreal
Yeah,
in '98, I missed that by a couple of years, but obviously read up on it. And
yeah.
when I moved to Montreal, a lot of people talked about it. Did you realize at the time that you were going through something truly unique? And I
Yes.
say that kind of within the context of COVID. To me, this is our great war. And because our generation, like you and I think we're born at a time where we, not to get too Fight Club, but we had our great war was an internal one. We had no true struggle. We had no kind
Yeah.
of enemy. We lived very good lives, which we're so fortunate for. And then this is the first time where we've really had to hunker down and say, yeah, this is the thing we're going to do together. Screw the economy, screw all these things. We're just going to get this done. Did you ever have a feeling like that during Montreal, or was it still just two small sticks go?
So there's two things. One, it certainly felt like it didn't feel like you were in it for the long run, simply because it was seasonal. So you knew that it was inevitable, it was going to melt. Um,
Yeah.
so that was the main difference between that and COVID. With COVID, you're, and I think this is actually where the anxiety for people is coming from is so many unknowns. Like in Montreal in '98, you knew that if it wasn't going to melt in 2 weeks, it was going to melt in 4 months, and at least you at that 4 month marker, you knew we're out of this. But did it feel like something very serious? Yes. Even as a 15-year-old kid, I remember waking up because I had to go to school that day. And I think it was our first day back from the holiday season. So we were off for 2 weeks or so. And then it's first day back. I get a phone call uh, from a friend, and he says, have you looked outside? I said, no, I haven't. He said, it looks like hell has froze over, and we're not going to school today. I said, really? And
Yeah.
I looked outside. You can't even imagine. Just looking out the window was not enough justice. It just looked like a really bad winter storm or day. But when I walked out, you're talking about cars with about 3 to 4 inches of ice from all around them. They were solid to the road. Like you couldn't. There was nothing you can do to get to a car without using some sort of an axe.
Yeah.
And and it felt very apocalyptic. That was truly the word to describe it. because it was utter silence in the streets. We'd walk because at the time, we didn't have power, but good for analog. You can pick up the phone and dial someone. So you didn't have to
Yeah.
worry about your smartphone not being charged and such. You could just easily pick up the phone. So we were able to connect
Yeah.
and meet at someone's house, whoever had power at the time. But walking there felt truly apocalyptic. Trees were on the street, cars were frozen, no one was outside. So that for that 2 weeks, it was still scary because if you were listening to the radio, because that was your cable didn't work and all that stuff, but or at least for me it didn't. But you can listen to the radio because you can put in 2 batteries and hear some a little radio play. You listen to the radio.
Yeah.
The concern really was elderly people and those who lived alone in a cold apartment. That was really the scary part. But if you were a family, and we were lucky, we had a fireplace, we could throw some logs of wood. So it wasn't easy. It was 2 weeks of there's no showers, there's no hot water, there's no power. What do you do for food? That was very challenging. So it was a very challenging for 2 weeks, but you knew there was an end to it.
Yeah, fair. Did you see a similar sort of social rallying of people, getting behind, supporting, like, neighbors coming over to see if you have a cup of salt or sugar or whatever you do? Like,
yeah, you definitely saw that, and you saw it in such a short period of time. And it was, like we were fortunate because my mom's a hoarder with food, and so we had a freezer full of frozen food, which is now thawing out. You have to eat it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no power, so you gotta go through this food. So we had probably the best dinners I could ever imagine. Like pasta with calamari in it and just amazing meals. And I remember thinking, my gosh, I haven't eaten this well in so long. But it's because our finest food was frozen. And
so
we would
my
invite
equivalent
people
of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, nice. My equivalent to that was yesterday was my birthday, and of course, not much going on, so I just cooked myself a nice meal, and I'm a big wine guy, so I have a pretty extensive wine collection. I kind of went through and I was like, all right, what's one of those bottles I've been saving for like a special occasion? Because I need to pick me up. So it was like, let's open that like really old, really nice bottle that I've been wanting to like save for something really nice. And yeah, I'm going to sit at home and have some video chats with friends and crush this incredible bottle of wine myself.
Nice.
Good for me.
Nice. Well, happy belated, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough time.
You. Yeah.
It's a tough time to, the difference then was you can physically be around people. And so that was a massive difference, to be able to be close to people then. And you encouraged it. Like in our case, everyone had to be in the same room because the source
you needed body warmth.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And the source of heat was a fireplace. And so no one's going to go anywhere else. And so I think that made it it's amazing how much easier, looking back now, and more positive that experience was compared to this. And even if I did this for 2 weeks, I would say that experience without power was, without electricity, was far more positive.
Mm-hmm.
So then the question then becomes, okay, so here, let me ask you this question. Do you think society would be ready to trade the internet for getting rid of the lockdown and social distancing?
All right. I'm going to answer this not like right now, like not after we've already had a month of this, because everyone's obviously fed up with the current situation. So that would be a pretty quick and easy flip, but more from like ground zero, or from like blank slate. What would we do? I think society, I think individuals would much rather have human interaction than the internet. From that like human side, I think when we put on our business caps, it's the other way around. Because fine, not having physical presence and having to adhere to social distancing and shut down a lot of business and stuff, that's affected the economy pretty terribly. not having the internet would destroy the economy.
Fair
If we
point.
didn't have
Yeah.
the internet for like weeks or months, then that would be terrible. But that said, I think people would be a lot happier.
Okay. So
uh,
then,
well,
would
I
you?
think,
Yeah. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to the last thing I was going to say too. I think the other funny part about it too is social distancing has probably disproportionately affected more lower income people, people that were already in difficult and struggling situations, versus fortunate people like us who have jobs that we can easily work from home. The interesting part is if we instead flipped it and took away, the internet instead of physical presence, it actually go the other way around. Bartenders, servers, delivery people, they'd be fine. They'd be cruising along. You and I, without, the ability to connect to things over the internet, we'd be the ones with jobs at risk. And so it would be the more affluent who I think would be in a lot of trouble. So it'd be an interesting social experiment from that side to see how, people would deal. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's funny because if you said, would you now give up the internet for a month and get remove social distancing as a rule and get everyone back to normal or a new normal now without an internet? Because you're right, that would have a massive impact. But essentially, you would have those who are more affluent, those who have homes, those who certainly have jobs that make them more mobile. They're able to work more remotely. I would you know be very curious to see what that would look like. That would be that would be
Yeah.
very interesting to see. I mean, of course, I'm not
Yeah.
that interested. I actually wouldn't want it to be a reality, but certainly,
Not even a part of you? See,
not even a part of me. Not even.
I
Although
still,
maybe for my kids, I can get them off their devices.
oh, see, I still have that, like, what would I even call it? Closet anarchist or
Yeah,
closet socialist or
yeah,
closet something that,
yeah.
I literally, so I grew up on a farm in Manitoba, and even though my parents have sold most of the farmland, I promised them that we've kept a few hundred acres that's just like bushland, yeah, that I grew up like playing on, and I've promised them that that's going to stay in the family. There's that part of me that's kind of waiting for the world to just fall apart and for me to go out into the woods, and maybe that's what I'm getting ready for here. Is I'm growing the beard so I can be a crazy and it all goes to hell.
So let me ask you then: do you think, sort of, if we had to put a scale together in terms of being a survivalist, like, are you Rick Grimes from The Walking Dead, sort of the ultimate, get us through it leader plus kill people and all that, or are you fully tech dependent? And then there's probably a bunch of characters I'd love for other people to chime in and give me those names, but there's certainly, on that scale, where do you think you lie?
So I almost feel like I shouldn't answer this question because it goes against so much of the persona that I'm trying to create in a business world. But like, the beard is truth. Like, I grew up on a farm. I was a Boy Scout. I hunted as a child. Like, I know my way around a gun. I know my way around how to build a fire. I know how to like survive in the wilderness. If you send me out, I know how to like find, like, I know my shit. So yeah, in that way, like, I'm one of those people that like is sort of has that meme of I'm secretly excited for the zombie apocalypse because I
Right.
know I'd be okay.
Yeah, I feel that same
Yeah.
way.
So
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I feel that same way. Um, I feel like in the event that something like that would happen, I feel it would be on the top of that scale. I don't know how high it would be, maybe just slightly above the middle, but I certainly don't feel like I'm someone who would be dependent on those things. There's a couple of factors though that you have to think through to, or at least examine to say, okay, where do you lie? So if we even broke that down, so let's look at your ability to operate without technology would be one measurement. Your I'm going to say this, I don't know if it's true, but let's imagine your willingness to eat anything. I think that's another factor.
mhm.
um,
Yep.
because you'll have more of an open mind around what you're going to put in your body.
Yep.
What else do you think?
You gotta be ready to eat bugs.
Yeah, yeah.
Um Well, okay, so I'll throw in another one into the mix, but I actually think that social and leadership skills are key.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, yeah, I know in like zombie movies and things like that, you get the crazed lone gunman, whatever dude who like goes off and. But let's be real, humans are where we are because of our ability to socialize and coordinate. So it's actually like, yeah, if you can band a group of people together behind a common idea, subdivide tasks and like find expertise, then you're going to be way better off. So I think leadership here's our seek moment.
Yeah.
Leadership is valuable even in a post-apocalyptic world. Like the ability
Yeah.
to gather a group of people together and like coordinate them, and not in some like culty way, but like in a, all right, the 10 or 12 of us or whatever have to survive. How are we going to do this? One person needs to become our medical person. One person needs to become our food person. One person needs to become our like defense person or whatever that means. So yeah, I think leadership is definitely a skill that I think in modern business, we like very much we promote and we say is wonderful, but it's also a little bit tongue in cheek because, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, what does a leader tangibly actually do? But I actually think that in like extreme situations like this, you see the values of leadership. And then I think the other one is like, and this may be tied to leadership, but is the mental health aspect is like stoicism. Um, if tomorrow this got really bad and like things went truly south,
Yeah.
are you an individual that can look at the worst of situations and not necessarily find positivity but keep going? Fortitude, can you soldier on? And I think that even that trait is tied to the other things you said, is like, will you eat bugs is one of those like, all right, this is going to suck but I got to do it, let's start growing an appetite for these things. So yeah.
Yeah, I think leadership, of course, is a big factor. Being able to rally people, be able to navigate around your threats, because you're going to have some people are going to be threats to you, and so you have to be able to convert them into frenemies, whatever that is, whatever that means. And then I think there's another factor, and actually in the business world today, we do hear a lot of demand for this, and this is the resourcefulness. So I think you have to be extremely resourceful. And I hear it from companies too today. So I know it's happening in both the private and public sector, where they're looking for people who have this skill, and they're looking to develop this skill. And the skill is essentially, how do you make the most of what you have around you? And I think when you're in a bush on your own or with a select group of people, you're always going to lean on that person who's quite resourceful, who can make shelter out of something, who,
Mm-hmm.
is it the ability to build, is it the ability to think openly, creatively, like, can you be creative, can you, like, how agile are you in terms of turning something from nothing to something of
Yeah.
value, so I think that is another. So what are we at? We're at four things. We're at leadership. We're
I was
at
just gonna say, as you were talking, I was starting to nod my head. I was like, I think we just stumbled across our great business idea, which is, what can businesses learn from survival in a zombie
yeah,
apocalypse?
yeah,
I don't know if this
exactly.
is a book, a podcast, or what, but
Yeah,
there's something here. It's
there
like,
is something.
come on,
Yeah.
who is the team that you're going to build to survive the zombie apocalypse, and what is the equivalence in the business world?
Yeah, and it's true. And you know what? And right now, as fortunately in the situation with COVID, I think organizations are going to organically form into that. But those who know of that model, or at least come to terms with it, or a model of that looks something like it, what happens is when they start to move around their workforce and allocate their resources, are they going to choose the person who's more resourceful, or are they going to choose the person with the most experience? Are they going to choose the person who can collaborate more effectively and lead people, rally people? Or are they going to choose, someone who, again, maybe has the title or has the most seniority, but can't inspire or rally people? So it'll be interesting to see. I think we'll actually see that model play out.
Yeah. I'm actually curious to know. Obviously, there's already been a lot of layoffs and things like that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really curious to know how some of those decisions have already been made. The only ones I know of with a bit of detail, a friend of mine works for a consulting firm, and they're being pretty explicit about what's going on and what they have to do. So, for example, they cut everyone's salary by 20%, but with the proviso as well that everyone was ideally supposed to be working 20% less. So they said whether you want to just like, if you're struggling with your days and you can only work, 46 hours a day, cool. Or if you want to just start working 4-day weeks, cool, that's fine. But they did have to also have some layoffs. So they just laid off one team wholesale. They said this team is just not where we're at, what we're doing. I'm curious how other organizations are approaching this right now, because it's a reality. And I sadly think that this first month is not going to be the worst of it. I think actually the next 2 months is probably we're going to see the worst of layoffs and parts of businesses that are either going under or having to shed people. So I would love to know from a strategy and leadership perspective, how are those decisions being made? Are you, going through and laying off your lowest performers? Are you just picking teams similar to this business that I mentioned? Are you approaching your business and just saying across the board salary cuts? There's a lot of hard decisions that have to be made. So I'm very curious to see how they're going to be made.
Yeah, and I think
Have you caught much of it? Or?
I have. So I've heard of different types of approaches. So the first is, where they lay off redundancies. So they lay off individuals or resources. Could be technology, could be anything that are just redundant, that they perceive to be redundant, and that helps them with their cost saving. And then they go one step further and then identify individuals who are they're going to put on a part-time basis. So they put them to 3 days a week, 2 days a week, and that's based on projects and projections of revenues as it relates to that business unit. So if you're a developer and you're working on, a web app for company X, and company X is in an industry that's under a lot of pressure right now, or threat, or there's potential loss of revenue, it's likely you'll be moved to 3 days a week. So that's, that sort of makes sense. And then at the very top, so now the survivors, the people who are going to help get the company through, they take a pay cut. So I've seen that model play out, or some iteration of that model be played out, where it's like a 3-step or 2-step approach. I know Harvard Faculty of Arts and Science, they started from the top. So they took the 25% pay cut, and then they started to move down as they saw fit. I've seen another organization put it out there, voluntary. The leaders are going to take a 20% cut, and the rest of the organization, if anyone has some points to throw in the pot, go for it. And so you can go in there and say, hey, I can give 10%, I can give 5%, give 3%. That was actually curious for me, because I thought, what if you are not that person? What are the implications for being that person and for not being that person?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be really curious to know how that was received. I mean, it's I think I was watching some video today that talked about a tragedy of the commons, which is kind of the inverse of that. The tragedy of the commons is, if everyone becomes selfish, then it's basically game theory. If you become selfish, then you screw yourself and everyone in the long term. And so otherwise, and this is kind of the flip, is if nobody can sacrifice anything, there's going to be some hard decisions that have to be made. But if you're able to identify that you can scale back or cut back or give, then we'll be okay. And that's always, and knowing a bit about, human psychology, that's actually the harder thing to do. Giving up what you have is far more difficult than preventing yourself from taking what you don't have. It's that, what is it? Value versus utility curve difference.
So it's interesting, because if you're in that situation, like I'm just thinking of myself, and I put in points into the pot. There's a certain level of expectation. So there's always that give and take. There's almost like if you think about, like, there was a philosopher who talked about, there's no selfless person, right? I think it was Immanuel Kant, I think, who talked about that. But
Tons,
anyway,
yeah.
so essentially is there's always this give and take. So if I give a few points today, what am I getting in return? Even if I'm consciously not doing it, I'm doing it inadvertently. Do I feel like I feel good? Of course, I feel good. I feel like a good person. Do I feel like at some point down the road I'll be rewarded? Of course. Whether I'll be rewarded that this all boils over and my colleague is, you know, rescued and saved and you know, great, fantastic. So it's funny to think about what your mindset is if you're going to give up, and if you can afford to, then great. But I wonder what the implication is 6 months down the road if your company goes through another transformation for whatever reason, and it's like we forgot that you sacrificed yourself, you know, and now we're letting
Yeah.
you go or whatever the case may be.
Behavior be rewarded.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. So look, man, it's been it's been really good.
Tons of fun.
Yeah, I could see this going places this week. I didn't even there's some things I wanted to ask you that I didn't get a chance to ask you.
Yeah, it's great talking to you.